Good evening, ladies, gentlemen, and all variations thereof, and welcome to Nobody Wants to Die. At least that's what I would have said a few weeks ago. Considering what I now know, those words feel a little disingenuous. The original plan for this video was a full series playthrough, numbering 10 episodes and an epilogue, talking about and addressing the various issues of connection, obsession, alcoholism, belief in an afterlife, and the pitfalls of immortality. But that discussion we will have to save for a different game, because Nobody Wants to Die has unfortunately fallen into an entirely different pit. Undisclosed generative AI. If I had not had to do some research on the .bnk audio file system that the game uses, looking for a sound effect that I liked to use in the intro, I would never have found out that a part of the digital assets and textures used in NWTD are AI generated. The fact that the game uses generative AI is not disclosed anywhere on the Steam store page or in its marketing materials. NWTD is a good example of how studios sneaking in generative AI harms both players and artists. By using AI art in the digital assets, the studio removes a portion of income from the artists they could have hired to design those assets to specification, rather than just relying on approximations from a machine learning algorithm trained on what is, the majority of the time, stolen work. It's a bit of a scummy corner-cutting tactic which forces the onus of analysis on the consumer, who would be unaware of the use of generative AI unless they took a close look at the background assets of certain sections of the game, by which point Steam's 2-hour playtime refund period would likely have elapsed. From the player perspective, finding out that generative AI was used in the game, especially after completing a playthrough, feels like a profound betrayal of trust. I placed my faith in this studio to provide a product I would enjoy, but now I have to put forward the question. If generative AI was used in one portion of the game, where else was it used? How much of the writing that I thought felt weird or slightly off was actually written by generative AI? What about the character voices, the 3D models? How much of the programming of the mechanics could have been done with AI? Not only does this remove any trust I could have had in the studio, it also pushes me to avoid games made by the studio in the future, because I know I cannot trust their word up front. It also severely damages the relationship between publisher and consumer, especially if the developer didn't even disclose to the publisher that they used generative AI. I mean, if even the publisher isn't aware, how is the consumer supposed to be able to tell? When I was playing the game, I concede I did not notice the Gen AI assets. I wasn't paying too much attention to the background details and was more focused on my commentary at the time. If I hadn't done some research afterwards, I would have been happily promoting the game to my audience without any knowledge whatsoever of the true content of the game. And that part is what scares me the most. It feels violating to think that someone could make me promote something just because I didn't pay enough attention, just because I wasn't paranoid enough to search for the weird artifacting and illegible text that dates the generative AI of the time period. However, it is possible to overcorrect on that paranoia. Recently, Fail Better Games, the accredited creators of Fallen London, among other wonderful titles, put forward a new game called Mandrake. It's a lovely looking farming game about mysterious happenings in a sleepy village, and it looks wonderful. But people have gotten so jumpy about the existence of generative AI that people are starting to see it where it doesn't exist, such as in some of the promotional materials for Mandrake. Now, Fail Better Games have a commitment to avoiding usage of generative AI, and they've been around the block a few times and have made their stance very clear, so I trust their word. While the usage of undisclosed Gen AI has somewhat dampened my interest in covering NWTD, it is still a game which contains a fantastic soundtrack and an interesting story, and the digital assets that quite a few people have indicated as being Gen AI make up a relatively small part of the game. To me, in my personal view, this seems like a developer on the team used some temporary AI assets as a placeholder and then forgot to remove them. But I can't be sure about that, or the possibility that more AI assets may crop up in future games made by this studio. So, what's the takeaway on this? Well, no one has enough energy in their life to check every single video game for AI-generated assets, and the paranoia that can rise out of trying to do so will just make your experience of the world worse. Unlike Epic, Steam does have labeling to distinguish games that use AI-generated content, but it's still up to the publisher or the developer to disclose that information, so be careful when purchasing. But if someone says that something in a game looks weird, maybe check it out, do your own research and come to your own conclusions. I would love to live in a world where the usage of Gen AI is disclosed automatically, but the world we live in is profit-motivated, and underhanded tactics are what some studios use to get ahead of the competition. So be careful, do your research when you feel it is necessary, and of course, fuck generative AI. Thank you all very much for joining us for this brief interlude between series. I wish I had better news, but I can say that next week we will be starting something brand new on a Wednesday. Have a very good evening, everyone, and a very good night, and we shall see you all next time.